Behavior podcast, the podcast that takes you deep into the heart of Louisiana's history and current, most chilling true crime stories. I'll be guiding you through the darkness of these crimes and all of those involved. Each week, we dig deep on those forgotten crimes or those crimes that are currently happening with the underlying legends that continue to haunt us. So lean in, listen, and get ready, because true crime is anything but ordinary. Stay with me as we unravel what happened in these mysteries. So, if this is your first time listening, hi, my name is Sarah Studier, and I'm your host for Criminalist Behavior Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the Earl Family Murders, and yes, it's an oldie, and this is episode number 34. I want to thank you for listening to the show, and I really hope you enjoy it. So, trigger warning, the episode may contain content of a graphic nature, including descriptions of physical and sexual violence against adults, children, and animals. Listener discretion is advised. Y'all, a little quick banter. I just wanted to let y'all know, y'all don't have to drive like a bat out of hell. Like, I do know that I do drive fast at sometimes, but that's like on the interstate or the main highway. But damn, this morning, after I dropped my fiance off at work, I'm on my way back so I could commute my way to work, and I kid you not, they had this young man that was riding an ATV, and he was pulling out of a gas station parking lot as his business was literally across the street. And he had to ride away. Like, he went up from behind me, like from the parking lot of the gas station as I was waiting at a red light. And then he proceeded to try and cross to get to the other side of the highway where his company was. This SUV came from nowhere, flying. Now, I kid you not, the speed limit on this road as you're going from this bridge, this intersection, and this freaking red light, like 35, maybe 45. I kid you not, this dude was zooming. This kid literally on the ATV crossed, damn near made it. But because this little asshole of an old man, no offense, old people, decided he wanted to haul ass, hit this kid on ATV. Now, I say kid, but like, he's younger than me, so everybody's a kid. But gotta be in his, if I'm correct, maybe 20 years old. And this kid flew. All I see is the kid in the air on the ATV, parts of either the SUV or the ATV flying in the air, and then like the dude just landed in a nearby drainage ditch, which is overgrown and very deep, by the way. So, me being the person I am, as I see an accident, I will stop until emergency personnel arrives on scene, or I know for sure the person is okay. I run. I'm chucking it, y'all. I don't run. So yeah, if I'm running, baby, there's a reason. I'm running and I can't even see this guy. All I see is the ATV flipped upside down, and I'm like, oh my God, where's this guy? I'm over here running. I'm about to dig through this damn drainage ditch trying to make sure this kid's okay. And finally, I'm like, are you okay? Say something. And then he's like, I'm okay. And I'm like, oh my God, okay. So he's alive. I'm like, okay, let's try to work on getting you out from this drainage ditch, and we'll assess the damages, right? Like, this drainage ditch was filled with water, by the way. So I'm over here. I'm like, do you need me to call the paramedics? Like, I'm about to call the paramedics, whatever. He insists on that. The guy that hit him, again, an old man, gotta be in his late 60s, 70s. Hell, he could have been 80. Which most old people drive driving Miss Daisy on a Sunday. Not this dude. This dude was speeding, boo. No, this dude's like, motherfucker, you just ran out in front of me. Like, what the hell were you thinking? I'm like, what the hell were you thinking, flying like a bat out of hell? They had some onlookers from the gas station, like, yeah, you motherfucker, blah, 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 blah. Like, you need to slow your ass down. Why the hell you going so damn fast? Like, I kid you not, this shit is all unraveling. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be late for work. Nonetheless, I'm like, whatever. I could care less about this old man right now. I know he's good. His vehicle might be a little damaged, whatever. I didn't even assess the vehicle for damages. I'm worried about the kid in the drainage ditch, okay? I'm making sure this kid is alive. He's good. He ain't got no broken bones. Or if he does, I mean, no. It's not a life-threatening thing. Look, the kid finally comes from underneath the ATV. And then, like, I'm like, you need some help? Come on. I'll help you get out of there. He then starts walking, getting out. Of course, he's a little lightheaded. I'm like, take your time. I know your adrenaline's pumping, but you really don't know if something's seriously wrong with you. I mean, I just seen you fly. I know you flipped and you landed in this ditch, like head like that. Oh my God, that was crazy. So the young man proceeds to get up, and then he's just like looking, and then all of a sudden I'm like, are you sure? Okay. What is your name? Like, you need me to call anyone? You need me to get something for you? Whatever. This old man that hit him said, oh, I'm not going to press charges on you, but if you're okay, I'm about to leave. This, I kid you not, he didn't. Before, let me back up a little bit. The kid wasn't even out of the ditch, and this man's like, oh, I'm not going to press charges, but I got to be in New Orleans for 8 o'clock, and I can't be late. Gets in his vehicle and drives the hell off. Me befuddled, like, huh? What the fuck? Did that just happen? Y'all, kid is okay. His company guys were coming, like, apparently they heard everything happening. Like, I did not leave until I was 100% that this young man was okay. So the workers come and they're like, what happened? I'm like, that blue SUV just ran him over like a bat out of hell. Like, oh my God, shit was insane. Like, I do apologize. I said it all on phone, but he had to clear. But this old man just like, whew, Lord, my poor little heart. I didn't want to witness no death, and I'm so glad I didn't. I'm so glad he's okay. I really, truly hope he is okay and nothing else is seriously wrong with him, but he seemed okay. He was alert. He was talking. He was making sense. But I had to get that out, y'all, because, oh my God, that was insane. So, I know you tuned in for this podcast, but that was my banter. That's how my day started. By the way, I was not late for work, and yeah, I'm just trying to get this day over with because that was chaos. So, on with today's episode, the Earl Family Murders. Now, this happened in the 1900s, the early 1900s. So, like, the beginning of the story takes place in 18, but, like, the actual crime itself happened in the 1900s. So, in 1902, 6 members of a family that was known to be farmers were brutally annihilated in Calcasieu Parish, Louisiana. And the 6 family members consisted of the Earl family. And this literally was in a location known as Walsh, Louisiana. And this crime obviously shocked the South, not just Louisiana, but all your underlying states, because it was brutal, y'all. A traveling farmhand who had apparently no motive to do this, he would initially be arrested and possibly pay the price for this crime, okay? So, we got the Earl Family Murders, consisted of a family of 6, and that were murdered, by the way, and this potential suspect that may or may not get away with this crime, okay? So, Lemuel and Mary Earl, they were from New York. The couple met and they married in the year of 1872, where they moved to Iowa from New York, and Lemuel worked as a merchant and a farmer. And in 1874, this was when Mary and Lemuel had their first child, and they named their child Fred. When Fred was just 2 years old, Mary found out she was pregnant with her second child. And Mary and Lemuel's second child was named Ward. In 1881, the Earls had their first daughter, in which they named her Maud. I know, old-timey Maud is such a old-timey but great name. The fourth child came a year later in 1882, and that would be the Earl's fourth child, and this was a boy named Fay. Now, I know nowadays you hear the name Fay, that's mostly women, but back then, this was a young man's name. And John Earl was born in 1885, but the final child, which would be the sixth child of the Earls, was conceived in 1889, and that last child was named after his father, and he was a junior. His name was Lemuel Shelton, also known as Lemmy Earl Jr. Now, the Earls decided to pick up and leave from Iowa in 1890, which was a year after their last child was born, because there was a drought that took place, and it literally was not good for those who were farmers, obviously. And according to neighbors, the Earls were literally forced to relocate because Lemuel Sr. was fussing with the neighbors. So he had some issues with his neighbors, and that's why neighbors thought he left Iowa, okay? So this is when the Earls decided to move to Welch, Louisiana, which is a small town in Calcasieu Parish. The name of Calcasieu, in case y'all were wondering, is French, and it means crying eagle. And it's said to be the name of a Atacapa Native American leader. In the late 1800s, Calcasieu Parish was a little less than 7 miles total and had a population of about 300 people. The Earls established a rice farm here, and they really just kept to themselves. They isolated themselves from their neighbors, who, by the way, were French-speaking. So the Earls, coming from New York and Iowa area, did not speak Cajun French, and that's what their neighbors spoke. So they didn't understand the language. Earl's neighbors would often be upset with them because Lemuel Earl Sr. was said to take his frustration out on his cattle. On cattle itself that ate rice plants. Well, if you're growing up and your source of living is a farm and it's literally how you earn your keep and put food on the table for your family, but yet you have Susie Q's cattle coming to eat your crop where you can't make money, I mean, I could see a fuss. I would be raising a fuss. Would I? So Earl obviously was taking frustration out of his cattle. Now, I wouldn't have hurt the cattle, but I would have at least let them neighbors know, like, hey, do something with your cattle, because, like, this is not cool. You earn a profit with your cattle. How would you like if I did something with your cattle? Because he's losing crops as these cattle are eating his rice. So ranchers said that they would find cattle injured. Y'all, this might be graphic. I did give y'all this warning, but warning. That Earl actually apparently injured some of the cattle with shooting them. And there were gunshot wounds. And occasionally they would find tongues of the cattle being cut out. And this was Lemuel Earl's way of making his point. Now, no, I'm not okay with animal cruelty. Not at all, by any means. The cattle didn't do it. It's not their fault. They're trying to survive. The owners of that cattle, however, should have been held responsible. And I'm not saying that you should have went beat the owners or killed the owners or cut the owners' tongues out. But at least have a conversation with them and be like, hey, look, I don't want no trouble, but, like, keep your cattle off my shit. Shooting cattle and cutting their tongues out, that's just cruel beyond means, and I'm not okay with that. I understand his frustration, but I'm not okay with that. So by 1902, Earl's oldest son, Fred, was farming, and he decided to do his farming in Iowa. Their second son, Ward, also followed in the father's footsteps, and he operated a plantation farm on his own about a mile away from his father's house. Most of the family lived in a rent home on Ward Earl's farm. And at the time of this event, Lemuel was living in a cottage on his farmland, and Maud, who was 23 at this time, was living in town where she worked at a general merchant store. Maud, she moved out the house. Like I said, she was living in the town, not on the farmland or renting anything from Ward, her brother, but she literally married a man named Charles G. Ingram, who was from Orange, Texas. And she literally married him whenever she was 21 years old, on her 21st birthday to be exact, which was April 21st, 1902. The Earls were isolated on their farm, and like I said, they kept to themselves, rarely had any conversations with their neighbors, and that's why it literally took a long time for anyone to notice that they weren't really seeing any members of the family. And this went on over a week period of time. So on February 24th, 1902, a man named Mr. Downs called a general store where Maud was working, and he spoke with the owner, mentioned someone was at his livery station claiming to be Ward Earl. He said that his name was Ward Earl, and he was trying to sell a pair of mules and horses. And according to this caller, Mr. Downs, who owned a livery station where, they did everything with cattle and stuff, this seemed odd because he was wondering, like, did the Earls mention anything about moving? Were they in any type of financial stress? Like, this just seemed like odd behavior. Now, I'm not really sure how this dude that was claiming to be Ward if the townspeople knew the Earl family. I don't, that part is a little for me, but nonetheless. So, hearing this, when the store owner mentioned this to Maud, she worried that something must be wrong because there was no reason that her brother would be trying to sell any of his livestock. So Maud then hired a driver to take her to her brother's farm. Whenever they arrived, the house was locked when they went in to try to check on the family, so Maud and the driver broke in to the house just to make sure that the family was okay. They were immediately succumbed by a foul smell, and they moved further into the front room of the house, and this is where a very, very dark scene took place. Maud and this driver discovered the bodies of Mrs. Earl and her 19, 17, and 12-year-old sons. The body of Ward was in an adjacent room to them, and lying on the floor in front of the home of the Ward home, with their throats cut and skulls shattered, were Mrs. Earl, Faye, who was 19, John Earl, who was 17, and Lemmy, aka Earl Jr. Earl Jr. I'm so used to Earl being a first name, but no, oh my god, I'm having a moment. Lemuel, Lemuel Jr. And Lemuel was, like I said, 12 years old. Lying on a bed in a room adjoining this other room was the body of Ward. He was 25 years old, and he was found with his head split wide open. A short distance, probably about a mile or so, it was, I'm going to get this, y'all. The body of the father, aka Lemuel Sr., was found lying in a ditch of water by the road, and he was shot through his heart. The guilt of this horrible deed, like, who could have done this? And it was crazy because Maud and the driver arrived at Ward's home about 7 o'clock in the evening. And this is whenever they came across the side of the house, so it was closed, and she noticed that all the doors and everything was locked. They broke in and they discovered this gruesome ass scene, right? So the driver found a lantern in the kitchen and he lit it. And this was because, it was 7 o'clock in the evening. It's starting to get dark outside. And he had an idea of what, he was going to see before they seen that gruesome scene, because the air felt very heavy. The smell was there. And, the smell of decomposing flesh is just horrible. Something you'll never forget. And you just, get this sense when you walk in and there's a dead body in the room. You literally get this sense come across you, you just know. At least, I know I do. Maybe it's just some, witchery. I don't know. But I know I get that sense because I've came across so many dead bodies. I worked in a medical field, hospice, okay? So don't think I'm crazy. I'm not no crazy murderer, nothing like that. But, dead people, I came across it. I've seen so much death. It was disturbing. So, the driver wanted to get Mrs. Earl, aka Maud, out of the house from seeing all of this, and she wouldn't allow it. So the garnish light that was flickering from the lantern is what confronted them all with the horrible gastric scene that they came across, where they entered the room with the bodies of the 3 boys and the mother. That was just completely awful. So 2 of the boys had their throats cut, and the mother, whose corpse had been brutally thrown across the bodies of her son, was so mutilated that it was hard to tell by what means she had actually died. And to add to all of this, rats, y'all. Rats were eating the bodies of the torn flesh from the faces of these people. The floor was covered with dry and clotted blood. Y'all, I gotta take a breath right quick, because I can't even freaking picture the scene, as they described it, just a bloody mess, blood all over, dried up, clotted all over. But to not even be able to recognize the faces of this foul ass smell, and then rats were eating their flesh, their faces. Oh my freaking, I can't. Oh my God, I can't. Whew. So, oh man. The terrified woman and the driver stood just gaping at the horror in front of them. And they just was trying to get this image out of their head, and they just kept running from room to room, just checking, seeing what else is going on in this house. And that's when they discovered Ward that was lying in an adjacent room. He had been shot in his head, and his blood was just like literally covered all over the room. Like, it was horrific. The two living people of the Earl family, so notice they had 6 kids, and then the mom and then the dad, right? The two living people among them was the driver, who assisted Maud, who was actually like about to pass out, like she was about to faint, and the driver literally grabbed Maud and drove like hell to the town where they let the people know what they just discovered. At first, people couldn't even believe what actually was being told, but finally, people decided to actually go out and investigate to see if what they were saying was actually true. The news spread like wildfire. The whole town went amok. The fact that the elder Earl, which is Lemuel, like, he wasn't at the house. Like I said, he was about a mile away from the house. So, like, the fact that he wasn't there, and I mean, it took them a little while to find him, they were literally just like trying to figure out if he did it, something happened to him, is he missing, like what's happening, because he's missing at this point. And that's whenever they started searching, which that's whenever they came to find his body. It wasn't until that morning that it was discovered, like the next morning, that Lemuel's body was actually discovered. Then one of the searchers came across it in a ditch about a half a mile from where the cottage that he was staying in was. And the body was covered with straw because whoever killed him was just trying to cover his body up so it wouldn't be as noticeable. And a rag hole in the breast is how they said that Mr. Earl died. He had been shot with birdshot. And judging from, like, the way he was shot and how he was shot, and, like, the casings of the ammo was all bunched up, the murder must have stood close to him when he fired. So, like, he was literally right up against him whenever he fired that shotgun. Ward had been shot and his throat had been cut. Mrs. Earl, the mom, and her sons had been beaten, and all of their throats had been cut as well. Brutal, y'all. It's just freaking brutal. The scene was made all the more horrific because of the time that had passed since the murders. And like I said, the smell was there. Rats were eating the faces. So when the authorities were notified, search parties were organized to search for Lemuel. And that's when, they found the body at the ditch. And this was when 6 members of the Earl family were now pronounced and discovered dead. They were horrifically murdered. Nothing like this had ever happened in the small town of Calcasieu Parish in Welsh, Louisiana. And as a community, as small as it was, like I said, no more than 300 people at this time. Everybody was just wondering, like, who the hell could have done this? They were looking at their neighbors like they can't trust their neighbors. Like, who do you really live by? You know what I'm saying? This close-knit community just couldn't even trust their neighbors. Or was it somebody who was just passing through that could have created this whole freaking ordeal, right? So, it was then that a bystander who heard of this incident recalled that one of Ward Earl's workers was missing. Putting this with a mysterious message that had come from, like, Charles about somebody representing themselves as Ward Earl trying to sell some cattle, some livestock, they began to suspect that the man that was literally asking and pretending to be Earl to sell some of this livestock was possibly the killer. And that man worked for Ward. So, who is this man? This would be no one other than Alfred Baston. Alfred Edwin Baston. Alfred was born and raised in Missouri in 1881. At the age of 16, he left his home and he worked as a traveling foreman. So he literally just, got odd jobs from farm to farm until his time was up with them. And he literally just rode the train from town to town just seeking work. One day when the train stopped in Welsh, that's whenever Alfred decided to get off, and he decided to just make his home in Welsh, Louisiana. And he found work at Ward Earl's plantation. He was known as a nice man who worked hard and was well liked by the Earls and all the folks that he met around in town. Authorities began to look into whether or not 22-year-old Alfred Baston was the one that was posing as Ward Earl in order to sell some of the livestock. Perhaps they were wondering if he literally murdered the Earl family and Ward, then went to try to sell his livestock. Apparently, allegedly, Alfred visited a gun repair shop and a watch repair shop, leaving Ward Earl's shotgun and watch. Y'all keep this in mind, okay? The shotgun. Lemuel Sr. was shot with a shotgun, okay? So this would be, if I'm going to just put this evidence into play, Lemuel Sr. was shot with his own son Ward's shotgun. Now, not by Ward, obviously, because Ward succumbed to those injuries as well, but nonetheless. So he gave his name as C.R. Baston to the gun shop, and to the watch shop, he gave his name as A.E. Baston. And none of these people at these shops would know Ward Earl on sight, because Ward was never really in that area. So the suspect found a Wells Fargo driver and decided to send a package to Batson's mother in Missouri. It was later found to contain nothing but rice, but he retrieved the watch, but left the shotgun for repair and the livestock for appraisal. So, this suspect, who they may think is Alfred Baston, but they're not sure 100%, but this suspect mailed a package to Alfred Batson's mother, which, who else would be doing that, right? But whatever. And it was a package of rice. Okay? Stay with me. So, if Baston had murdered the Earls, he had plenty of time to get far away from southwest Louisiana, because it had been literally 2 weeks since the Earls had been seen alive and their bodies were discovered. So, the guilt of this deed was leaning towards Ed, a man who has been employed by the Earl farm for the past year. Baston is at large. The last, he was literally just MIA. He was last seen in Lake Charles trying to sell a pair of mules. So they confirmed that it was in fact Baston, aka Alfred, that was trying to pose as Ward to sell these mules at the livestock. And this is what led to the discovery of the murder. Baston literally disposed of the mules to Mr. Downs, who agreed to pay him $175 for the pair. Now, $175 is not a lot these days, but back then that was some decent money, right? $175 for 2 mules. So that's whenever, Mr. Downs then called the general store, blah, blah, blah. The owner got in touch with him, yeah. That's how that all unfolded, right? So, from there, that's whenever Alfred was literally being sought after, right? He was a potential suspect in this case. At the very least, they wanted to get more information from him, so if maybe he would know any information about this, if he knew anybody who wanted to harm the Earls, any of that nature, right? So, after the bodies of the Earl family were discovered, authorities found Ward Earl's buggy at the livery stable in Lake Charles, which was where, Batson brought the 2 mules to sell, right? And inside of a vest that was found inside the buggy, they found a letter. And this letter was signed by Alfred Batson, y'all. The letter was full of details about where to find each of his family members and made it clear to assume that he would be dead by the time that this letter would be discovered. So, Alfred posed this letter inside of Ward's jacket that was left on Ward's buggy at the livestock seller. And it was signed by Alfred himself, okay? Listen to what this letter stated. He that finds this will do the deed a justice by sending my mother or my sister word of my death and how it occurred. This is all I request, dear friend. So a long and happy life do I wish to you all. Signed a farewell, Alfred Edwin Batson. Friends of all. Ha ha. Bye. Bye. I'm gone. So folks thought that Alfred Batson's letter was maybe a suicide note. Or maybe he had left it trying to, throw police off guard, thinking that he may have been dead, right? Or he went out to kill himself, whatever. So maybe the police just wouldn't go out and still look for him as a potential suspect, right? If that was the case, he literally did not succeed. The letter stated that Batson expected to be dead when the letter was found, and by the time the crimes and evidence were discovered, Batson had literally taken a train to Missouri, where he was arrested and extradited back to Louisiana. Authorities tracked Batson to Clinton, Missouri, where he was arrested and then sent back, right? If Alfred Batson had carried out this crime against the Earl family, Ward, who gave him work on his farm, what was his reason for doing so, y'all? Why did Alfred give off this nice guy persona, and he was literally never pursued by the law? He had no priors, any of that nature. Authorities viewed all the evidence that was stacked against him, and they thought it was enough, even though most of it was circumstantial, was enough to charge him with first-degree murder in April 1902. The case was a bit difficult because of how brutal the crime was, and that the letter did not match Batson's personality, right? Because he was this friendly, outgoing, never hurt a fly, blah, blah, blah person. At least that's his persona he led off to everybody who he was around and knew him. But according to most people who knew Alfred, he was reserved, polite, very well behaved at all times when he was in the presence of other people. He seemed very cheerful, and he didn't really seem like he was a suicidal type of person, that he was contemplating, taking his own life. There was obviously no motive that anyone could think of on why Alfred would commit such a heinous act. And if robbery was the motive, then why would he kill the whole entire family instead of just one person? I'm sure there was opportunity he could just get that one person. So some people just was parting ways. They didn't believe that he was guilty because of this persona that he laid out in front of them. On the other hand, the evidence that was linking Alfred as a suspect was, the fact that people seen him trying to sell Ward Earl's livestock at the livery. And there was witnesses, the letter, the names left at the repair shops, because You know, he was trying to get Ward Earl's watch fixed and then the shotgun, right? And he left 2 different names, which is flawed, but nonetheless, Batson at that. And they all pointed out to the same man, regardless of what name he gave them. The watch shop pointed out that this was Alfred Watson, and the gun shop pointed that it was Alfred Batson. So, like, he's not getting out of this. Like, yeah, it's hearsay, or like it's eyewitness testimony, and we convict people on eyewitness testimony, right? So, also, there was also that package that was mailed to Alfred Batson's mom, right? So, this suggested that he had at least stolen some of the goods, like the rice from the Earl family, and sent it to his mom. Also, the fact that he was contemplating suicide because of the letter that was found on Ward Earl's buggy inside the jacket pocket. So, this was the evidence that the prosecution was using to presume Alfred as being guilty for the Earl family murders. The only other explanation that could be possibly explained was that somebody might have been framing Alfred Batson by using his name and sending a package to his mom, which isn't unheard of, but it's a little highly unlikely, I would say. So, the circumstantial evidence included the letter at the livery station, which the prosecution claimed was pretty much a confession letter. Witness also swore it was Batson who posed as Ward Earl, and Batson's court-appointed defense argued that it was improbable that a man would murder 6 people just to get $45 from selling their livestock. Now, whenever Mr. Downs called the general store, it was said that it was going to be $175 for the pair of the mules, but now the defense is arguing all Alfred would have got for the pair of mules was $45, not $175. The defense also laid ground for reasonable doubt when they claimed 2 men who held a grudge against Lemuel Earl had tracked a family down in Welsh, Calcasieu Parish, and murdered them. So, the defense is trying to say that due to the fact that he had issues with some of his neighbors back in Iowa, that they tracked him down to Welsh, Louisiana, and they are the ones that did it. Now, can you produce these people? No, you can't. Now, is it possible somebody else done it? Yeah, but the evidence is literally pointing, even though it's circumstantial, the evidence is literally pointing to Alfred, y'all. So, he would be the object of affection. Batson, Alfred Batson, y'all. He literally drew hundreds of women outside of the courthouse and the jail because he was such a young and handsome man. Who gives a damn that he is on trial for first-degree murder of murdering 6 people? But because he's young and handsome and he had this personality going for him as how he presented himself, the women were flocking by to the courthouse and the jail trying to throw themselves at him, trying to get with him, y'all. Insane. Another thing that brings to mind just thinking of it is the Ted Bundy case. Like, what? I don't understand. Like, what about what he's going to jail for? Like, what the hell can he offer you while he's in jail? A fucking telephone call and some goddamn commissary? Like, he ain't got nothing to offer to you, boo. Like, who gives a damn if he looks hot or he's sexy? The motherfucker's a killer. And he ain't got nothing to offer you. Like, what you gonna do? Write him a letter? He gonna be flirting with them guards and other people, anything to get what he has to get by while he's serving his time. Like, I don't understand women, or men for that matter, whoever does this. Like, I just don't understand it. Man, I could think of a case with that. Gypsy Rose. How her husband literally was like, they got married while she was in prison, got out 2 months later, guess what? Boom, dead. Divorce. She got back with her ex, got pregnant for the ex, and then boom. What? You see, there's a reason Like, you just don't do that. You're only gonna get hurt in the end. There's nothing good that could come from that, y'all. So, Lemuel was known for having upset neighbors in the past, which made this theory seem plausible that the defense was trying to use that somebody tracked him back to Welch, Louisiana. And in fact, the defense team noted that two strange men had been seen lurking around in Welch just days before the murders were discovered. One of the men looked a lot like Alfred Batson and even had a scar on the side of his face that was similar to a scar on Batson. The defense said witnesses had identified the wrong man and Alfred Batson was innocent. So y'all, if this is true, they had a look-alike like Alfred Batson to the point that he had a scar the same place on his face. Why was this man mailing a package to Alfred Batson's mother? Okay? You forgot about that key, huh? Because I didn't. So, the prosecution challenged the defense to present these strangers in court. Give him the chance to be questioned. But the defense was never able to track down the identity of those men. So, were they actually men that actually did that? Did one person actually look like Alfred Batson? We just don't know because it could never be proven. Alfred Batson was found guilty, and the presiding judge, E.D. Miller, sentenced Batson to death. Batson's defense would file and win. Y'all heard correctly. The defense filed and won a motion for a new trial. They stated that prosecutors introduced irrelevant documents as evidence, including that the letter that was allegedly written by Alfred Batson. There was no proof that he had written it, and the letter was not a confession. If y'all recall, excuse me, like when I read that letter, it never did say that he confessed to killing the murders. What it stated was something completely different. I mean, it pretty much stated that he was just like contemplating suicide. It literally stated, "He that finds this will do the dead a justice by sending my mother or sister word of my death and how it occurred. This is all I request, dear friends, so a long and happy life do I wish you all." So, where in that did it state that he was confessing? So, I get that as far as the defense stating that part. I do get. Batson's defense also filed for a They filed for a change of venue because they believed that he could not get a fair trial in Welch, Louisiana, aka Calcasieu Parish, because everybody knew the Earls in that area and it just wouldn't be a fair trial. So his first conviction by Judge E.D. Miller was actually overturned on a technicality. So a second trial was scheduled. But because the courthouse had to be repaired, this actually delayed that second trial happening for several months. But at this time, Alfred Batson did remain in jail. He was not out on bail or any of that nature. Many of the jury members had known the Earls personally, and some were said to have made public statements of Batson's guilt before and during his trial, which nowadays, like, the jury is on a hush order, basically state, like, they cannot discuss the case with anyone, even in their family or anything, because they just can't. You can't know nothing about the case or anything. That's just the laws and regulation against that now, but back then, obviously, that was not in play. So, they were literally going about talking about how Batson admitted his guilt before and during the trial. The defense got their new trial, but the court ruled that there was not enough evidence of prejudice against Alfred that they needed to change the venue. So the change of venue request was denied. So they felt that he would stand a fair trial. Alfred Batson's second trial was held in Calcasieu Parish, and this was on March 3rd, 1903. His mother, which was Mrs. Joseph Payne, was in court every single day supporting her son. And she done that during his first trial as well, so it ain't gonna be no different for a second. And like I said previously, women was flocking because he was this young, handsome man. Again, early 20s, 22 whenever he committed these murders. So, like, we're going at 22, 23 years old. Women were crowding into the courtroom, and they actually held a vigil outside of the court supporting Alfred Batson. In the end, Alfred Batson was again found guilty of first-degree murder. This time, when the verdict was read, his mother fainted. Batson's defense team filed motions for a new trial and a change of venue, but they were denied. Some people with influence stepped in to help. Multiple members of the state pardon board petitioned Louisiana Governor William Hurd at the time to instate Batson's death and sentenced him to life in prison instead, saying that the evidence against him was merely circumstantial and did not have enough proof to prove him guilty. So they were trying to take the death penalty off the table and just put him in life in prison. Still punished for the crime, but not by death. They warned the governor that they could literally be signing a death warrant for an innocent man. So these people are still believing that Alfred Batson was not guilty of this, and if he is, he shouldn't get death, he should get life. The governor called a meeting with Judge Miller, who presided over Batson's first trial and the second trial. And when asked his thoughts on the case, Judge Miller told the governor he was convinced that Batson was guilty. He reasoned that 2 juries had found Batson guilty, and the judge said that his defense attorney's refusal to let Batson take the stand didn't help his case. So the defense didn't allow Batson to defend himself or allowed him to get on the stand to plead his case. The governor made it clear that he would not be commuting Batson's sentence, that the death penalty would be staying. Batson's mother was seated at his side when the jury came in and read the verdict. And at the time that the jury gave the verdict, the mother or the son did not even show any type of emotion when the verdict was read. A few minutes after, however, Batson's mom was seen shaking from head to toe. She sat upright, her chin in her hands for about 5 minutes, suddenly fell back in her chair and just sighed. Her face is seen like this death-like picture. She was pale white. She just fainted. And it became very alarming to everyone that was in the courtroom. They thought that maybe she would have just died right there on scene. That's how dramatic this was. Deputies went to assist her, and her condemned son was first to administer care to his mom. And he opened her clothing at the throat and chafed her hands in a way to revive her. So, her son sitting there working, trying to revive his mom, who just, fainted in the damn courtroom. So, a cot was literally brought into the courtroom. And Batson's mother was placed on the cot. And there were medicine given to her, and in a few minutes, she came back to. Her first words to everyone was, "Are we still in the courtroom?" To me, y'all, again, this is my opinion only. To me, it seemed as if that she was, planning this, trying to, extend the trial or the verdict, whatever, but that's not the case. Maybe she faked this, maybe she didn't, or maybe it was just that overwhelming that she really did faint. Just crazy. So, she then called for her son. He leaned over, and they kissed each other on the lips. She pressed him to her breast and just cried and cried and cried. The deputies called on Alfred Batson to go back to jail, and Batson's mom kept trying to plead with them to not put him back in jail, not to separate her from him, that she needed her son. Alfred Batson's execution date was then set. His execution date was set for Friday, August 14th, 1903. Thousands of people sat outside of the jail in Lake Charles, and Batson spent time receiving visitors, including his mom. Wearing a new black suit that his mom had bought him, he wrote letters to his sister and his brother, and each letter he vowed that he was innocent, offered his best wishes and love to his siblings. Batson's mom came to Lake Charles to be present at that trial, and she's still the same helpful little woman, and she's firmly convinced that her son was innocent. Speaking of the case, she said, and I quote, y'all, "I have not the slightest doubt that my boy will be acquitted of this horrible charge, for I know he did not commit it. I have questioned him time and time again about it, but he has always taken me in his arms and said, 'Mother, you know I could not have committed that crime.'" That was a direct quote from both Alfred Batson to his mom and from Mrs. Payne to her son, Alfred. So at 1 p.m., the sheriff and his deputies walked Batson from his cell to the gallows. His death warrant was read aloud, and Alfred Batson was asked if he had any final words. He said that he liked to thank the sheriff, his deputies, and people who supported him for their unending kindness to him. He declared that he was innocent for his last time, saying he was about to meet a more just judge than he had here on earth. At 1:30 p.m., the drop fell. Alfred Batson struggled for a time, but by 2 o'clock, a half hour later, doctors declared Alfred Batson dead, and his body was cut down. Alfred Batson's mother, Mrs. Payne, never wavered any support in her son's innocence. She always declared that her son was innocent of this. After he was executed, she took his body back home to Missouri to bury him. From generations after generations, the Batson family have maintained Louisiana executed an innocent man, and someone else got away with murdering the Earl family. So, the surviving Earl children, because remember, not all the Earl children passed in this brutal murder. Fred and Maud were the two children that were not slaughtered, and they agree that justice has literally been carried out for their family. But they kept fighting over what was left behind. Fred and Maud just couldn't get along, trying to figure out who's gonna get this, who's gonna get that, how they're gonna distribute each form, instead of Ward's farm, I'll take care of this. Oh, Dad's farm, I'll take care of it. Why couldn't you just split it? Seriously, y'all about making a profit. I guess one was livestock and one was just rice, so I guess, I don't know. Nonetheless, y'all could both run and split the money half and half. Boom. But I guess greed. Anyways, Fred Earl claimed the property, saying he was the oldest and had every right to the farmland. Maud wanted her share, so the siblings' debate turned bitter, and with many fights and going through different court proceedings, by the end of 1904, an agreement was finally reached, with Maud being granted 50% of the estate. There are rumors that are still spreading, even till this day, today, that Batson confessed to the crimes, but he only confessed them to his mother. And that someone else made a deathbed confession years later and stated that they were the ones responsible for killing the Earl family and not Alfred Batson. There was no hard evidence of either rumor, nor was there any hard evidence that Alfred Batson was the one who actually did it. When it comes to the murder of the Earls, we'll really never know if the right man was actually executed, because like I said, yes, all the evidence did weigh against Alfred Batson, but again, that was circumstantial. But at the same time, you're looking pretty damn guilty. Why you fleeing? You was working for the Earls. You get caught trying to pose as Ward Earl by three witnesses, because you got the livestock, the shotgun, and the watch shop. You sending a package to your mother. It's all there. I don't know. So, it all comes down to what you believe and how this crime has been told. the first known recording, they literally had a song that was recorded about this case, y'all. It was recording of the ballad and recorded by Alan Lomax in 1934. They made a song about this entire case, the Earl Family Murders, y'all. How insane is that? Lomax traveled the world throughout the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. He collected materials to document, and he literally just made song and dance for the Library of Congress. So he's up there in, the law. On a trip to Lafayette, Louisiana in 1934, Lomax recorded a Louisiana string band playing a ballad they called Batson. So the name of their song was called Batson. The band was led by Wilson Jones, who used the stage name Stavin Chain, with Octave Amos playing the fiddle. Y'all, true Louisiana fashion, a fiddle, okay. But not much has been written about Alfred Batson and the Earl murders since the execution in 1903, so Lomax was intrigued by the song when he heard Jones mention it was based on a real crime that happened in Louisiana that was decades later. Jones said he had heard versions of the story and a song from friends through the years, which led him to imagine his own version of Batson. So he created his own version. The best song known was Batson. Batson, a young man, was supposed to have killed a whole family at Lake Charles with an axe. After a horrible fight, he was hung, protesting his innocence to his last breath, and the field hands would sing of him for hours on end. These are two verses from this song, y'all. I'm going to just say it and it's whatever. Mama brought me coffee. Mama brought me tea. Brought me every single thing except that jailhouse key. Singing Batson, I didn't do her the crime. Then the second verse is, you can dress in purple, you can dress in black. Dress in anything you want, but you can't bring my Batson back. Singing Mama, I didn't do her the crime. So they making fun of this, but at the same time telling actually what happened. Batson's mom was pleading that her son was innocent. So it's crazy. It's crazy. It's comical, but a little harsh. The version of Batson featured 37 verses and was about 12 minutes long. It's a testament of how complicated the story of Batson and the Earl's murders was. And the song really reflected the Earl murders and the man that was executed for the crime. But in Jones's version, Batson's mother was the hero. In contrast to all these different stanzas with Batson, there was literally detail that was missing from the crime itself. And that was in the main focus of a version that was actually created, another song. So musical historians noted that they'll never know if Batson really did it. All they know is that the Earl's surviving family members were torn apart by the deaths of their family, the mother, the father, and their siblings. So what do y'all think about this, y'all? I am very curious. Do y'all think that Alfred Batson should have been hung for his crimes? Do y'all think that he was guilty for this? There's enough evidence stating that he is, but again, allegedly it's all circumstantial. Do y'all think that he was framed? I would love to know what y'all think. So if you enjoyed our show, please rate and review us on any of your podcast apps. So we're on Apple, iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube, social media, wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to share, rate, and review us. And come back on Friday, as I am going to be bringing you another case. This is about a Tennessee woman who was charged in a Louisiana cold case that happened in the early 1980s. So, y'all, don't forget, I was nominated for a Women's Podcasting Award, and I will be linking that website and the voters link in the show notes. So you can go to www.womenandpodcasting.net. And like you can literally go to the awards, and then we're in the documentary category, so you can find us. It's a Criminalist Behavior Podcast, a Louisiana True Crime Podcast. Be sure to vote for all your other favorite podcasts. You don't even have to vote for me. However, I do appreciate your vote. But anyways, yeah, that's enough about that. So until then, this is your host, Sarah Today. Don't forget to like, share, follow, or subscribe to your local Louisiana podcast, Criminalist Behavior, a Louisiana True Crime Podcast. Thank y'all for listening, and I really hope y'all enjoy y'all night. Bye!